roundtable. We have a group of 7 people dealing with VMware Cloud Director every day in and day out. We want to start, for those of you who don't know everybody on the call, with a little round of introductions, and then we are going to get started with our first meeting topic. We are going to discuss NSX-v to T migration, focused around vCD primarily, but also some of the other topics around that. With that being said, I'm going to hand over the introductions to Jörg Leif, or Jörg Lu, how the Americans always say.
Yeah, hey, I'm Jörg. I'm a technical product manager at VMware, covering Cloud Director and all the different integrations and extensions that we have for that.
Good. Romain.
Yeah, Romain Decker. I'm in the same team as Jörg. I'm a TPM for the VCPP program, and I cover all things networking for cloud providers.
Daniel.
Hey everybody, Daniel Paluzik. I give Romain and Jörg a very hard time from the field perspective. So I am part of the cloud solution architecture team that supports our global cloud providers. And so you probably have seen some of my crummy blog posts and whiteboard videos out there.
Wonderful. Tobias.
Hi, my name is Tobias Baschek. I'm based inside ComDivision as a cloud solution architect, focusing primarily on the whole NSX-T stuff.
Matthias.
Yeah, Matthias, ComDivision as well. I'm mainly focusing within the cloud area on the automation piece and trying to automate everything I come across.
Fabian.
Hey, my name is Fabian. I'm sitting in your living room at the moment, as you might see. And yeah, also at ComDivision, working as an architect, delivering consultancy and deployments into service providers across the globe. So a lot of them now require NSX-T and migration, and I'm happy to join this chat here.
Yeah. If that behind you is your living room, I'm going to.
It's your living room, Eve.
It's very windy in your living room.
I know.
Okay, and my name is Eve Sanford. I'm also from ComDivision, and I primarily do at the moment Cloud Director architecture and helping come up with more reference architectures for our set of service provider, whether those are very small ones but also very large strategic ones. So it's always interesting to see the different perspectives on the different products. Okay, so why did we get together here in the first place? NSX-v is going end of life, end of support. So at one point in time, people need to migrate off of it. The exact date is somewhere in 2021. Who has looked it up in the meantime?
2021? You mean
2022?
January 2022. Don't
January
scare the
16.
audience.
All right, by now 20 heart attacks.
But that potentially gives people more reason to actually finally look into it. Now I think it's we have it now May-June timeframe, so it's more or less just 6 months out until everybody should be migrated off of it. And so maybe we quickly cover the potential scenarios, or let me quickly throw in some high-level idea and then get the discussion started. So I mean, the first and obvious one is we start everything on a greenfield and start from scratch and build everything brand new, which always keeps the wonderful scenario. How do we get our existing customers over? So that's clearly one scenario that would potentially also work if we have more time frame. But the other thing is the different migration scenarios of placing just additional clusters in between, migrating workloads over, or the migration toolkit. And maybe let's start with that migration toolkit, Romain. Maybe you throw something out. I think there was just a new version released of that one. What can it do better? I mean, the first ones I have seen were already quite impressive compared to what we have on the more enterprise commercial side. It seems the service provider team is far better prepared to take actual workloads over versus the more enterprise or commercial side.
Yeah, that's exact. We just released the 1.2.1 version of the NSX migration tool. So the official name is VMware NSX migration for VMware Cloud Director, just for trademark. challenges. And it's the fourth iteration of the product. So it's a separate development process, separate life cycle. It's distributed in the VCD download page, and it gives the ability to have like an automated way to migrate NSX-v or VDC to NSX-T. So it's very granular. So it's at the org VDC level, and to allow for cloud providers to have specific maintenance window for their migration based on organizations. And the latest version introduced a couple of interesting features, such as directly connected all VDC networks support for migration. We also corrected a few things, and the major feature is the assessment tool. So it allows, it's really great, and I don't say this because I suggested the feature, but I did it. It basically allows cloud providers to assess a complete VCD instance. It will just loop on all NSX-v or VDC, and it provides two outputs, one detailed one, very detailed at the org VDC level, and one summary that details by features what is potentially preventing an automatic migration now. So the two important words are automatic migration and now or today with the current versions. So it provides you like, do you have vApp edges configured in how many org VDCs? And so on. So it's it's quite detailed, and it provides you categories of all VDCs, and also the severity. So if the items that are assessed can be mitigated or not. And it has been released now for 2 weeks, and I have seen 10 reports from 10 production environments, and it's actually much better than I expected. At least half of the org VDC could be migrated today with no further mitigation or nothing, no further interaction.
That sounds great. That would be a great time for a demo.
Well, we have, I think,
live demos for the first session, please.
Yeah, and we do have, well, I guess some Feature Friday recordings and other collateral out there on YouTube where you can have a in-depth discussion about the tool. But Romain, just to make sure that
place the link here.
Yeah, assessment, the assessment mode of the tool, and even well, the first part of the analysis is sort of read only, so you can run that against your production environment without the tool doing making any changes.
And I think that's. I'm sorry, Romain, go ahead.
Yeah, it's read only, and we support all VCD 10.x version, and you don't need to have NSX-T installed. Just your regular VCD deployment, and that's it.
And I think it's critically important that we start, testing out these environments, right, and to validate kind of the state of where you'll need to go for the NSX-T migration, right, and that'll give us the lay of the land of here's what objects can be automatically moved over. Here are things that cannot be migrated over yet. And here's kind of a game plan, right? And this assessment tool is very easy to run. I mean, it takes, in my testing, it was a couple minutes it took.
Yeah,
so
one of the most important parts is what Romain already said. You don't need to have an NSX environment already up and running. So you can do it at any time you would like to do it.
Yeah. And
so
it's really
to be sufficient. Sorry, does it include distributed firewall rules as well?
Yes.
Okay, so because that's I think that's the other part. But do I need to have so in the end I can do this with just to be sure I can have my old, let's say, vSphere 6.5 environment with NSX-v on the one side, and then I have a new vCenter with 7.0 U2 or U1, whatever is currently supported, and I can migrate that over, or do they need to be actually, the clusters need to be in the same vCenter, or the NSX needs to be in the same vCenter?
So for now, we support the migration to NSX-T cluster managed by the same vCenter, but that will be relaxed very soon.
Okay, because that's still one of the scenarios which I see very often when we talk to service providers, where they go, it's like, Yeah, but this is potentially a good point in time to really start with a fresh environment on the site. And so that's at least a good idea. If there is at least hope that this might come before January, but
no, much sooner.
But
Much,
yeah,
much sooner.
but again, in the end, I mean, even with the same vCenter, I can have two completely separated clusters. So I can have a new cluster, set up my NSX-T just against the new cluster, have my vCenter updated before. And so there are ways to actually make this still relatively feasible, and I can still go into a not fully greenfield, but at least greenfield from a cluster and storage and everything else perspective, and really migrate my customers into a clean workload. Because when I look at some of the service providers I'm currently working with, some of them come from version 5 point something and have always upgraded and upgraded and upgraded. I mean, vCD we cleaned out by moving them from Microsoft SQL to the appliance mode in the last year or so. But some of the other object trees and everything was never cleaned out. So, and there is always the kind of the demand for this. And this is one of the things which I said is the migration tool is based on the way how the workloads and everything are going to be migrated. It's at least cleaning up some of that as well. But talking about the caveats,
just one thing, Yves, I want to ask, because so you said is it an official product where we get GSS support if we have a problem, or is it like a fling where it's up to you, to the community? So it is really something where we can expect VMware GSS to help us when we have an issue here, correct?
Yeah, it's an official VMware product.
So that's good.
So you have GSS support indeed.
Speaking about support, as always, I'm always the devil's advocate in nearly every meeting, and typically from time to time, people always think it's like, why did we invite him in the first place? He just keeps telling all the stuff which doesn't work. So what are the areas where we see or where currently providers might expect some issues? So we spoke already before about potential scenarios like VApp edges. Matthias asked already about the distributed firewalls. What is the stuff which we currently can't migrate? Where do we see the issues? And are those really issues out there in the field, or are those more rare corner cases which only 5% of the service providers are using anyway?
That's a good question. So based on the output that I saw for like those 10 large environments, the main common blocker for the moment is shared networks. Because we migrate all VDC by all VDC, that's just an ideological way of migrating. If you have a shared networks amongst multiple org VDC, well, I mean, that's not possible. So we are already developing that feature, which will come also very soon. So we will support the ability to migrate multiple org VDC at a time that share a common org VDC network. Then we have things like SSL VPN, which the feature has been dropped from NSX-T. So we recommend to migrate to alternatives, either open source or commercial. And there is a white paper on that that I published last year. Things such as the app edges. And then we have like things that are not supported yet. So the tool is just preventing the migration, but things that are easily mitigated, like we don't support the migration of MTV app just because the VCD API doesn't support it. It's easy to either fill a dummy VM in the MTV app or just remove it or migrate it manually somewhere else and then move on. And it's well explained in the user guide and also in the assessment report.
I think the biggest blockers right now, talking to a lot of providers, is VApp edges in the shared network, right? And when we mitigate that, I think that will really open up, you know, a lot of the possibilities with using the migration tool for VCD. The other part of this too is it is a V to T migration solution, right? So if you have VLAN back networks or DV port back networks, it's not going to work, right? So, but you know, the one thing that I've been talking to a lot of providers about is this is one tool in the toolkit, if you will, right? You know, the beauty of Cloud Director is we can abstract multiple vCenters with attached NSX-v instances, along with independent NSX-T managers, right? So there's strategies associated with each of these, right? And as time progresses, that's one thing that I'm going to be stressing on sharing, right? And providing continued guidance on what are those strategies beyond using our migration tool and helping with any of these permutations on that. And I think that's critically important because there isn't a one size fits all for every provider environment with Cloud Director, right? Your environment might be different than another provider's environment, right? And we have to look at this from a aggregate and saying, what can we do that takes the easy items, migrates those over in a non-disruptive or minimally disruptive way, and then those bigger activities, what can we do from a strategy perspective?
Yeah, some alternative, just to mention them, for example, the Terraform provider that we have for vCD that runs against the vCD API has pretty extensive support, obviously, for NSX-v, but also growing support for NSX-T concepts. And just with the nature of Terraform to be able to read an existing environment into infrastructure as code, that helps for some environments as well, and could be used as a assessment or even a migration tool as well for certain use cases.
Two questions which came up for me. I mean, one is the shared org VDC networks. Does the assessment actually check if there is really shared usage? Because I know from the past that service providers very often just actually put that check mark because you never know what's going to come. So it's one of those scenarios where it's like in the good old days where people always, it's like install everything. I'm not sure if I ever need it, but let's just always go with everything. And I have seen often service providers just put that check mark in, and then you ask them, it's like, you only have one PVDC behind it. You only have one org VDC pretending. It's like, why did you put this on? And the response is like, yeah, because we don't know what we need in the future. And so that's one part out of it. Do we see that already in the assessment if it's really being used shared infrastructure? And the other thing is Daniel, more in your direction, is so there are really people using VApp edges, because I always thought it's like our internal use case and hands-on labs and a few other areas are the only use case for it. So maybe let's start with the edge use cases. It's like, what are they using VApp edges for? And then talk about the shared networks again.
Yeah, from my perspective, DHCP in any type of nested or hierarched environment, right, where I have overlapping maybe test and development use case where I need to take a template, deploy it, QA it, and then push it back as a template, right? That's a big use case, right? And I need to essentially have this where I have it available at any given time, right? So when we start talking about any of that north-south connectivity, right, within a VApp, right, that's where a edge is spun up, right, and brought in there. Which today with NSX-T, we have the T0 to T1 concept, but beyond that, we don't have as of right now, we don't have a solution where we can have that tiered hierarchy as we did with V and edge service gateways, along with VApp edges.
Okay, understood. So it's in general, it's a similar use case to what I have seen. I was just not aware that so many providers are actually really using that use case. I saw that more for software development and internal use cases in many cases, but it's good to know that at least people are working on that, because I was already thinking that we need to come up for something completely different for ourselves on that side. Back to the shared network, Romain, does it detect on the assessment side already if it's really being used as a shared network, or check things like, is it only one org VDC in the first place, or is it, if the checkbox is set, it's your problem and you need to then figure it out yourself?
So currently the one-to-one version only explain you if a particular VDC has shared networks in general, and how many VMs are affected So how many VMs are in that org VDC, but they may not be connected to the shared network. So when we will support the shared networks migration use case, so multiple org VDC at a time, the assessment tool will transform so that you will know how many org VDCs are concerned. So how many org VDCs are sharing a network and which ones. Now I haven't thought about are those networks actually used. I would expect so because they are configured, but yeah, you're right. It can just be a default setting. I have seen some providers having like multiple org VDCs by default for every organization, even if they are not using them. Org VDCs, for example, for performance tiers, and they are just sharing networks amongst those org VDCs. That's a use case that I've seen, but otherwise I would just expect them to use them.
I have one question too, because I came across that lately, and to be honest, I think the assessment tool is very cool, but how does it deal with workloads being provisioned using Cloud Director, but reconfigured outside the Cloud Director area?
Not support that.
I know that it's not supported, but you come across those workloads, and I know, and cloud provider tell like, yeah, it happened. We need to get out of that anyhow. So is the assessment tool able to detect those fat-fingered configurations? Let's call it like this.
No. So this migration toolkit or this NSX migration toolkit is leveraging it. You have to see it from a vCD point of view. So it will consume vCD API. So if vCD is not aware of something, the migration tool will not be able to handle those use cases.
Mm-hmm.
So Matthias,
yeah, I would like to ask, why is it always me? But yeah.
because normally in the past, those were always my customers. So
yeah, but this time I'm also in. I also have one customer which is using org-only network, and then we have dedicated firewall appliances which have been provisioned inside vCenter. So yes, their customers are there where we need to also talk or think about how can we migrate this sort of customers.
But I think that's always, as said before, that's always going to be the case, that we see service providers come up with all kinds of crazy ideas on how to do things. But I mean, in general, the migration tool is actually going to give is providing quite some good guidance already. There always needs to be some level of health check and all kinds of other things going on in parallel to the migration, because it's never, you never know what people do, and even when we do new service providers, we all know that every time we deploy, we do this, we actually train people in saying it's like, you don't touch vCenter anymore once we have vCD on top of it, and you come back 6 months later, look into the operations procedures, and you see the first point is like, oh yeah, upgrading memory is like, go into vCenter and upgrade memory, and you go like, oh no, this is going to, I mean, and sometimes, as much as I laugh that vCD over the last few years has been a bit more relaxed in many of these areas, on the other side, this always gives me the feeling is like, the more it gets relaxed on these features, the more we actually have to deal with the fact that the response from the ops people is like, yeah, but we did it always this way, and it still works with vCD, so why are you complaining in the first place? So yeah.
In our team, our development and engineering team has really done a great job of trying to provide flexibility for in vCenter changes, right? Or in vSphere changes. But you know, from an authoritative state, this is a cloud management portal. Any type of CMP platform needs to be aware and cognizant of changes from a tenant structure, right? So, well, there are corner cases where we have to change within vSphere, right? it's just a guiding practice to allow VCD to do its thing, right? And that's the beauty of VCD, is it automates a lot of these changes in the back end. And if there's some specific use case that we need to address, that's where you talk to us or talk to your field team on understanding, and we build out the business case to build that into Cloud Director. And we've done that time and time again. You know, the one thing, yeah,
from
I'm
a
sorry, go
networking
ahead,
perspective, I mean, if there are some network connections that are completely outside of VCD management or VCD managed networks, that's something you likely always have when you look at the, again, without connection to the VM from the internet or from some external customer connected VPN or whatever. And there is no way for any VCD API to figure out what's in that way that's outside the, well, the management domain. So that's something the service provider hopefully has documented and know about these other components that are in the way between the connection of the actual VM inside Org VDC and the Org VDC network, and how the customer or the application user connects to these VMs.
Yeah, maybe the assessment tool will be renamed to documentation tool in the future.
Yeah, I think that's going to be interesting. I mean, documentation is always a point. I mean, that's what I keep telling people when we do health checks and stuff like that. It's like, we are here to help you. So please tell us all the stuff you have done. It's making all our lives a lot easier. And I mean, in the last few years, it has become much better. But looking back especially in the 5.x days, all the different versions, is like how many service providers messed around in the databases back then. And then you had an upgrade and all of a sudden nothing worked anymore. And then you asked, like, what did you do? It's like, yeah, we found this blog article which described how to add additional operating systems into the platform. It's like, yeah, that was one of the areas which I asked when I said before, is like, can you tell us if you made any changes to the, you mean something like that? Okay. It's like, yeah. And so I think that's continuously going to be interesting. The other thing which I think is on the NSX-T side, and maybe it's just me haven't really seen much of it, especially when we talk to small service providers. I think what we currently are lacking, especially for those who start fresh, is, do we already have like a small scale reference architecture for NSX-T with VCD and everything else somewhere, which we potentially didn't see or find? Because that's, especially there is the VCF integrated approach and a few others which I found, but there seems to be nothing yet for, let's say, the small service provider who doesn't go with the management and edge cluster and la-di-da-di-la-di.
I think Daniel is just typing quickly. I'm not
publishing it right now.
No, so is there anything in the building in that scenario? Because I think that's going to be moving forward. I mean, up until, I would say, a few months ago, most of the small scale deployments still went with NSX-v, but moving forward, and those are the areas where I would say it's like, many of those smaller service providers are doing the complete implementation by themselves. They are not using VMware Professional Services or our team or any other partner. And I currently foresee there is still a high risk of them just going into a potential design, especially with tier 0, tier 1, etc., where we altogether don't give them enough guidance. I mean, it's always the question whether we need to all give them guidance, but is it just me who didn't see anything, or do we really not yet have anything yet there in that space?
So we don't for the moment. It's a work in progress. The exact format is still TBD. We are still discussing between Daniel, Jörg, and other members of the extended team working on that. But it's work in progress. We hope to be able to announce something before the summer or during the summer.
Yeah. We used to use the vCloud Architecture Toolkit. Many of you are familiar with that, right? Which are PDFs that were updated ever so often, right? And I think overall, trying to rethink that strategy. So that's all we can say right now on that. However, to answer the question, how we're covering that today is, one, I think that we look at it and we look at our VMware validated designs along with the NSX-T reference architecture on that, although that does show a prescribed build that has a clear separation of management, workload, and services or edge, right? But when we look at the VVD from a consolidated workload domain, it's very similar or analogous to that design. However, I don't think that is the hard part right now. The hardest part I see with a lot of our cloud providers is understanding NSX-T architecture.
Yes.
Bottom line, it's a totally different platform than V, right? And in some cases, I'll even speak from my own learning path, it was difficult, right, to understand some of the concepts from T to V, right? And if you were coming in here, didn't have experience with V, you're probably in a better position than somebody that had experience with V. And so every provider I've been working with or collaborating with, the first thing I've been telling them to do is just go through an NSX-T course. Just start understanding the architecture, right? Going through and understanding how this works is critical to layering on everything above that, Cloud Director to be specific, right? So, the path and the journey I'm taking many of our cloud providers is, go through training, understand the native NSX-T functions, then understand how they are identified in Cloud Director, right? From our objects, what is the network topology, and then what would be a migration strategy on that. But if you don't understand the kind of the first floor of the architecture, then we're just going to have challenges as we move forward. And T is our platform going forward through and through.
Daniel, do you see a lot of service provider ignoring the risk, running out of support in January, February next year? Because I know a lot of them, they know they need to do something, but they still kind of wait. But now we have 7 months left, kind of. We need to plan it properly, need to teach the people around it. How do you see it in the US especially? So can we tell them, hey, there's a time bomb in February and then NSX-v is exploding or something? How do you think shall we put the pressure on them to really now get into action with the topic?
It is not.
Since this was a forum that we're supposed to have real talk on, the answer is yes. And if you have any complaints, you can email rdecker@vmware.com and fill your complaints there. So
he's for the time bomb.
Yeah. In honesty, I think that I think a lot of cloud providers are at risk for hitting end of general support for NSX-v and don't have a migration strategy or aren't ready yet to cut over to T, right? And so I think we're going to have a lot of organizations that are going to scramble at the last minute, unfortunately. I just think that it's just the state of affairs. So we're just going to have to do our best to collaborate and support them on that. The beauty of this too, with Cloud Director, is we can run V and T simultaneously, even in the same vCenter, right? And so I think that is, it provides a lot of flexibility, right, on that. Doesn't answer the end of support question right now, but the biggest thing that I'm stressing it right now for the organizations that are looking at it today is you've got to train your people on understanding NSX-T because it can get complex quickly and for good reasons, right? Because T provides so much more functionality, right? And I think that
if I would know any company that could do those trainings,
I know. I just don't know. Who would have thought?
Eve, right? Any idea?
So.
Any idea?
Difficult. No, and I think it's coming back. I mean, I have been going through this whole process back in the days with VCNS to NSX-v, and it's not that many years ago that I did the last migrations, especially here in Europe, for service providers from VCNS to NSX-v. based on that, I know how reluctant they are. And I mean, we still have, I had a call with another service provider, I think 3 weeks ago, where they actually were sending out prepackaged browsers to their customers because they couldn't access vCD anymore because of the flash going away. And so it seems like they are pretty, they are well willing to take the risk on these specific areas. And I think it's what people underestimate is especially those who come from BCNS to NSX-v, because that was relatively straightforward for most service providers. It was just install a package and everything is done. And I think potentially some of them haven't understood yet that moving from V to T is not, hey, let's just actually upgrade an OVA. There is a bit more to be done there, and that might actually be another reason why we haven't seen such a big uptake yet. But hopefully this podcast will also, or this webcast, depending on which format you are going to use to consume it, is going to make sure that people really understand that there is something you need to think about, and you need to actually address it, because it's in the end, it's going to hit you at one point in time, whether there is a time bomb or not. I mean, the pure fact of having potentially a security issue in NSX edges in V, I mean, there haven't been many in the last few years anymore, but not that big ones anymore, at least. But something like that could immediately become a major issue for you as a service provider. So this is really critical to take a look at. It's not only about, hey, no one is going to help me if I have any questions. They might go, it's like, I didn't file any support tickets for the last 2 years, so why is this a problem? But I think it's taking a look at the other approach. Is like, yeah, this could be a security impact. They want to use, as we see more service providers also looking into container services, they want to have the most current VCD version. And I'm pretty sure that once we actually get into one of the next VCD versions, there will also be no interoperability with V anymore, because why maintain it if the product is no longer supported? So,
but if being honest, if service providers would put that amount of effort they put into working around of not supported features and stuff like this anymore, and they would put the same effort into the migration path to T, right? We would have been gone 3 months ago. So that's just my personal opinion. But what I'm interested in, guys, when did you see your last service provider spinning up a new infrastructure which is based on V?
3 months ago.
Really? Because I think they still spin up new infrastructures based on V, because it's just working.
I would say 6 months ago, roughly 5-6 months ago, yes.
Yeah, three months from my side. 3 months ago.
I saw one in January, just because that was their operating model.
Come on.
However, every service provider since then has started fresh with vSphere 7, VDS 7.0, and NSX-T. So it's that should be the bottom line. And the other little tidbit that I'm talking to a lot of providers on, some of them are still on 6.5 or 6.7, right? And they're like, well, we're going to do this, NSX-T migration, and NVDS is the supported switching platform, right? Where with 7.0, we have VDS 7.0, right? Which really simplifies the networking. So the one thing I'm stressing with a lot of our providers is, if you're doing an in-place migration or building out a net new cluster, go with 7, go with VDS 7.0. It's just going to save you a lot of future operational requirements, right? And it's just going to make it cleaner too on that. So
yeah, that is something I experienced as well. So 7 and the DVS, those two are the huge game changer migrating to T. I agree 100%. And nowadays I see a lot of SPs using that argument to just migrate the vSphere version and from V to T. So they're doing both in the same migration scenario, which makes perfect sense as well.
I think that's over the top. What we see in general is a lot of the cases is version update plus plus V2T more or less in the same place. But guys, it seems like we are already a bit over time on what we planned already, and
but I still love what Fabian is doing.
whatever
Yeah,
Fabian is doing
I did some training here. You know, I was seeing that the time is running out, and I just did some exercises.
So yeah, whatever. I think he's sitting really outside at the beach now. Before that, it was only the picture of the beach. I know he's really sitting at the beach.
No, Eve. I was running out of battery, and now I'm sitting somewhere strange in your living room.
I could have told you that there is actually a power cable sitting at the couch anyway, but
I didn't know that.
that's the point. We only tell that people afterwards. So as we are hitting the time marks, let's call out a round of last minute thoughts. So maybe everybody closes it off with a few sentences on why we should move from V to T and why why we should potentially wait for a few more days. Yeah. Then let's call it a day, and let's start with Jörg again.
Yeah, well, there's no reason to wait and no reason to not migrate, obviously. So run the assessment now and at least get an overview about what you have and get an estimate of your effort to migrate.
Good. Let's jump around a bit, Tobias.
Yeah, as you said before, if you as a service provider think about new services, container and so on, you need to go with NSX-T. So as Jörg mentioned before, no time to wait.
Okay, Daniel.
It's imperative that your operational and engineering teams understand NSX-T because we're going beyond virtual machines here. Tanzu Kubernetes Grid as a Service is available right now in Cloud Director, and you need NSX-T to run it. Bottom line, start.
Matthias.
Yeah, use the assessment tool, get a great overview about your infrastructure, what can be done nowadays, what needs to be re-engineered maybe. You use the migration path and upgrade to vSphere 7 on top. And as Daniel already mentioned, get educated, get trained to know your stuff.
Interesting. It's the first time Matthias using a closing statement without orchestrator or automation in it.
You're all for the win.
Okay, Fabian.
Yeah, I mean, NSX-T is more like a real network product to what NSX for vSphere was. So what I've seen so far, it's quite good, and I learned a lot from Matthias. Therefore, I think he's one of the right guys from our team who could help you with those things. I feel like a sales guy. Anyway, it's crucial, and the clock is ticking, so we need to get the power to the street to migrate to NSX-T.
Good. Romain, as you did the starting point most of it.
Well, what can I say more? Don't wait. Honestly, there's no reasons to wait. There are no reasons to wait. Get started, get dedicated, run the assessment tool today if you can. If you have any question, reach out to us. We would be more than willing to help you to understand or to guide you to a successful migration.
If you need additional cost-free support in your architecture, there's a cool email address. It's
Architecture@vmware.com.
Shameless plug. We're all on Twitter. We have the Cloud Provider Workspace available. There's the vExpert Workspace too. So please, we're here to collaborate, right? We're looking forward to the next session too, talking about other topics. Thank you, Yves.
Yeah, and that's actually the other good point that you raised that, Daniel. So we want to keep this format open and want to use this to answer the questions out there also from the community. So if you have any questions, if you have any topics you want to see covered, whether it's going deep into tenant app, cloud availability, next Cloud Director versions, whatever we can discuss next, reach out to one of us so that we can put that on the agenda. We are trying to build a more formal schedule and everything else as we go along. There are potentially other questions around NSX-T and everything else. As Daniel pointed out, there are the Slack groups, there is Twitter, there is all kinds of other ways to contact us. You will figure one out. And then we hope we catch you up on the next session. We plan to do this on a monthly basis. We will figure out how long it takes us to produce this and actually get this out on all the different medias, but we will do so and post the links everywhere. Thanks everyone for joining, and
you've clicked the subscribe button here. I think that's how it works nowadays.
Yeah, click the subscribe button and the like button and direct us and put
notification bell enabled, and yeah, TikTok, whatever.
Yeah, I think it's going to be too long for a TikTok, but maybe I make a shortcut version of it and make a 60-second track for a TikTok out of it. Okay, thank you all for joining for today.
Bye.
Bye.